Alright, this video is about fractions and decimals, but it's just the bare minimum that you need to know. So a fraction can be reduced by just dividing the top and the bottom by the same number. So suppose we have 15 over 40. Now you want to find a factor that is divisible into 15 and into 40. So obviously 5 is, right? 5 goes into 15 and 5 goes into 40. So you just simply can divide the top by 5 and the bottom by 5. As long as you divide the same thing on the top and the bottom, you are not going to change the value, the number value of the fraction. So 15 divided by 5, of course, is 3. 40 divided by 5 is 8. So 3/8 is what we call the fraction in lowest terms, or reduced. Okay. Now, when you have two fractions and you want to add them, so adding or subtracting, it's the same thing you need to know. Fractions. Suppose we had, 1/3 added with 2/3. Well, of course, they're the same denominator, so 1/3 and 2/3 makes 3/3. Or if you reduce that, divide the top and the bottom by 3, you get 1. So we could go ahead and add the fractions together because they had the same denominator. And so 1 plus 2 gave us 3 for the numerator. Now notice we don't change the denominator, we only change the numerator by adding the numerators. Okay? So that, if you had 2/7 and 4/7, of course 2 and 4 make 6, but it's 6/7. Okay? Same thing with subtraction. If we had 8/19 minus 5/19, you'd have 8 minus 5 is 3. 3/19. You could have 7 over 12 minus 5, well, let's say 8 over 12. Of course, 7 minus 8 is -1, so -1/12. Now, if the denominators are different, so let's say you had 1/2 and 1/3, and you want to add that together. Well, you have to change the denominators so they are the same. So in the first fraction, we can multiply the bottom by 3 and the top by 3, and then in the second fraction, multiply the bottom by 2 and of course the top by the same thing, 2. So what this does is it produces 3 over 6 added with 2 over 6. So because we ended up with the same thing in the denominator, you can combine the fractions. So 3 plus 2 is 5. 5/6 is the answer. So this is called getting the denominators the same, getting a common denominator. Alright? So whenever you are adding or subtracting fractions, you have to make sure the denominators are the same, and then you can add or subtract them. So if you had, let's say, 5/12 minus 7/20. Now sometimes it takes a little bit of doing to think about what is your least common denominator. What you can do is basically find the least common multiple. List the multiples of each number. Okay? So what are the multiples of 12? Well, 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72, etc. What are the multiples of 20? Well, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and it keeps going. Now the least common multiple is the smallest number that is in both of these lists. And 60 you see in both the multiples of 12 and the multiples of 20. And it's the smallest number that's in both lists. So 60 is the least common multiple, or the least common denominator. So how are we going to change 12 to become 60? Well, 12 times 5 is 60. So we can take the number 5 12ths, we can multiply the bottom by 5, multiply the top by 5. Same thing with the next fraction. You got 7 over 20. Now what can I multiply 20 by to make 60? 3. Alright, so 3 on the bottom, 3 on the top. So then this gives us 25 over 60 minus 21 over 60. So 25 minus 21 is 4. So 4 over, oops, this should be a 60 on the bottom. And then 4 over 60. Now that reduces, 4 actually goes into 60 15 times. So it reduces down to 1/15. Okay. So that's how to subtract fractions. Now, multiplying fractions is another very important skill. How do you multiply two fractions? Like, for example, if you have 5/6 times, let's say 3/20. Okay. Well, the way you multiply fractions is you multiply the tops together. So 5 times 15, or 5 times 3 is 15, and you multiply the bottoms together. 6 times 20 is 120. And then we would want to reduce this. So 5 goes into top and bottom. So if I divide the top and bottom by 5, I get 3 over 24. But then if I reduce again, we divide the top and bottom by 3, you get 1 over 8. So 1 over 8. Now, next thing, if some of you might have noticed that we could do some cancellation. If I had 5 over 6 times 3 over 20, and I did some cancellation, now the 5 is on top, and 5 goes into 20, so I can divide 20 by 5 and get 4, divide 5 by 5 and get 1. Same thing with the number 3. 3 goes into 6 2 times, and 3 goes into 3 1 time. So we could have done this a little bit easier if we had reduced it like that, and then 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 4 is 8. Alright, that's another way we can multiply the fractions. It's sort of like treating it all as one big fraction. But how do you multiply fractions? You multiply the tops together, you multiply the bottoms together. Okay? If you have a fraction with x in it, like let's say 3x over 10 times let's say 5 over 8x. Well, x is just some unknown number. But if we did some cancellation here, the 5 goes into 10 times, 5 goes into 5 1 time, and then multiply the cross, we get 3x times 1 is 3x, and 2 times 8x is 16x. The x is a factor that can be canceled, and so you end with 3 over 16 because I have an x on top and bottom. We can cancel that. Now, dividing fractions, you can just go, let's say 5/12 divided by 2/3, for example. Well, the simple rule here is that dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So this is the same as taking the 5/12 and multiplying by the reciprocal of 2/3, which is 3 over 2. And then we can some cancellation, or we'll just multiply together, bottom together, and then do the cancellation. If we multiply the tops, we get 15, the bottom together we get 24, and then if we divide the top and the bottom by 3, we'll get 5 over 8. So
divide, you just change it to multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay. Another very important thing to know about fractions is how to change a fraction to a decimal. If you had something like 3/5, you change it to a decimal. Well, use your calculator. 3 divided by 5. And if you do that on a calculator, you'll get 0.6 or 0.6. You don't have to write this in front of 0.6. You can if you want. The calculator will give that. You just divide it with the calculator. Now, if you didn't have a calculator, you could also divide 3/5. You can think of, okay, how do I change this to 10, 100, bottom. Five. Like doesn't number. The calculator and